All right, good morning. All right, so this is an oldie but goodie, okay? So make like you've never heard this. This man inherited a parrot from his great uncle, and he loved his great uncle so much, and so he had to take care of this parrot. Now, outwardly, this didn't look like a horribly difficult thing. The problem was the man himself was very shy, and the parrot swore all the time. So whenever anybody was in the house, the parrot would say something that was really, really embarrassing to the man. And so people would come to the house, and before the parrot could say anything, he'd take a blanket and throw it over the parrot's cage, and the next thing everybody would hear is, "Who the bleep turned out the lights?" Right? And on it went. If he shut the door on the parrot would say, "Where the bleep did everybody go?" You know, and it was just horribly, horribly embarrassing. And he kept telling the parrot, "You've got to stop swearing. You've got to stop cursing. I don't like it. I don't like that in my house. Now knock it off or you're going to be in big trouble." And the parrot would say, "What the bleep are you going to do about it?" So finally, he couldn't take it anymore, and the parrot is going off on a blue streak, and he grabs the parrot out of the cage, and he opens the freezer door, and he throws the parrot in the freezer and shuts the door. And he waits about 5 minutes. And he figures this is long enough. So he opens the freezer door and holds his arm out, and out walks the parrot, all covered in frost and little bits of ice on him. You know? And the man says, "Are you going to behave?" And the parrot kind of nods. And the man takes him over to his cage and sets him in the cage and says, "Good, now we have an understanding." And the parrot says, "Just a question." The man says, "Yes." And he says, "What'd the chicken do?" Okay. Oh, it's an oldie but a goodie, right? All right, so you know, in the Old Testament there is the story of Job. And boy, I like that story of Job, and I think that everybody in some way at some time can really relate to the story of Job. I don't have to tell you the story. All kinds of horrible stuff happens to Job. And just when you think it can't get any worse for the poor guy, it gets worse. And then it gets worse again. Wow, what an incredible story. And this is a guy who has a lot of faith. He has a lot of belief. He has a lot of trust. And yet all this stuff happens to him. Wow, what a bummer. I mean, I can only relate a fraction compared to what he goes through, compared to what he loses in the course of the story. So in the 16th century, there was a mystic, John of the Cross. And he coined this phrase that we know of today as the dark night of the soul. I would say Job was really having a dark night of the soul. Today, sometimes we trivialize this idea of, "Oh my God, I had to park a mile away. It was a dark night of the soul." You know, no, that was not a dark night of the soul. That was just the universe telling you to walk, okay? The dark night of the soul is the thing that really, really, really brings us to our knees spiritually, where we have to surrender and surrender and surrender in a way like we have never done before. I realize this is very difficult for us as metaphysical spiritual students because we get really good at trying to control things, don't we? You know, that I'll just affirm a little more and visualize a little more and do what I've been doing a little bit harder, and then everything will be okay. But comes along that thing, or those things that are really big. I mean, the epically big things in life, of which there are really maybe only a very small handful. You know, the sudden, you know, you're going down life at 90 miles an hour in the diamond lane, and all of a sudden your career comes to a very abrupt end. You know, that could lead you to a dark night of the soul, or the end of a long-term relationship, very suddenly, or the death of somebody you love. Very, you know, these things could, because they really rock the house, right? They really rock your house, and they make you start to, or an illness yourself, because they make you start to ask questions and look in a way like you have not asked questions or looked up until now. So for John, the dark night of the soul, for John of the Cross, the dark night of the soul had two components. There was an active stage, and then there was a passive stage. So in the active stage, I bring this up because this relates to what we talked about last week when we were talking about people's need for a reason. He says that in the active stage, what we're doing is that we're reasoning. If I could just know why, if I could just know why, if I could just know why. Why did they leave? Why did they die? Why did they fire me? Why? Now, we're here to tell you that why is just a trap that the personality sets for you. Everything would be okay if I could just know why. No, you wouldn't. Really, you wouldn't. And there is no answer to the why. But that's the first stage of the dark night, that people, when they're going through something, want to know why. And some people never get off the why. They stay on the why merry-go-round their whole spiritual journey in life, right? Why? As if there were an answer that would so satisfy them, you know? Why did I get sick? Why did they leave? Why did they fire me? An answer to the mind is not going to make a difference as far as the outcome. You know, what we see in the science of mind is that most healing happens in our life incrementally. You know, that most healing, we love the big wows. I love those big dramatic overnight healings. But what I've noticed in my time in science of mind is that most people do not heal in an instant. Yeah, absolutely it's possible. Our thinking can change in an instant. You know, we could make a decision that in an instant moves us in a new direction. But most healing in life, think about it. When you've had to forgive somebody, did it happen all at once? No. Usually, in most cases, it is a process. It's a spiritual practice. It's something that we visit again and again and again and again. And we were misled when we thought that forgiveness is something that we do one time and then we're over it and we never think about it again. After that, it's all just rainbows and unicorns and hearts and flowers, right? Well, you know, and I know that's not the case. We say, oh my God, I can't believe this is coming up again. I thought I forgave. How many times do I have to do this? Pretty much every time it comes up. Pretty much every time it comes up, you forgive, you let go, you bless, you release, and there's an increment of healing. There's an increment of progress. And then one day you notice, oh, I'm a little better than I used to be. I hold this a little more loosely than I used to hold on to it. Right? So that's progress. That's an increment of healing. So John of the Cross says the first stage or first aspect is this active part where we're asking why. And then the second part is this more receptive part where the only thing we can do is really look within ourselves to say, what is it that's deeply going on in me? Where are the walls in front of my heart? Where do I say, absolutely, this is a situation I could not forgive. This is a person I could not love. This is something I just could not bear or tolerate. It seems to me that sometimes the things that we judge most harshly in life are the things that we are so afraid if I were like that, that would be completely unlovable to me. You know? Now, the way I believe science of mind teaches us this is that God looks at all of God's children and God loves all of us alike, equally. That's very hard for us to believe, isn't it? Because our love, even though we like to think we're unconditional all the time in our lovingness, our love is, we're among friends, conditional, isn't it? Sometimes, you know, we think the people who behave well, they should get all the love. And the people who are not behaving to our liking, well, then they shouldn't be as loved by God. And that's just all about our own value judgment, isn't it? So the first phase is looking for the reason. Why did this happen? And what did I say last week? The answer to why is what your mother told you. Because. That's why. That's the answer to why. Because. Okay? And the second part is this passive phase where we really have to look within and see what's going on in me. What's going on in me? You know, in A Course in Miracles, there's this idea that I like very much. And the Course asks, would you rather be right or happy? And I know, if I'm right, I'll be happy. That's what we say, right? If I'm right, I'll be happy, right? But the fact is, this one is an either or, right? This one is an either or. And so would you rather be right or happy? And so often, I know people, and I bet you do too, nobody in this room, but perhaps people we know very closely, People who so want to be right that they are willing to be miserable, they're willing to be sick, they're willing to be lonely, they're willing to be whatever it is just so they can be right. I was talking, I had a class with the practitioners last week, and I said, you know, in the new science, this quantum physics, they've realized that, you know, 2 million bits of information come to your brain every second. Isn't that amazing? 2 million bits of information are coming to your brain every single second. But that would overwhelm us. We would just burst into flames if we got all of that at once, right? So what the mind is able to actually take in is 126 bits. Right? So now this is really, really interesting because, you know, especially in terms of how we remember things and how we remember our past, or what people said, or what people did. There were 2 billion bits of information coming at us every second during that thing that happened long, long ago. Right? And all that we could actually even take in was 126 bits. So the accuracy with which we have held the whole story is perhaps a little suspect, okay? Do you know what I mean? You know, like we didn't even get all the information, and we were there. We only got 126 bits per second, okay, out of 2 million. Would that make a difference in how we see what has gone on? Yes, absolutely. I believe it would. I believe it would. And this is why it's also really interesting when people say, oh, when I was a child, you know, I was never picked for dodgeball or whatever, you know, and that's why today I da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, well, you know, this is that first part of John's dark night of the soul, that where we have to have a reason. You see, the mind wants to go back and have a reason for something today. When what the mind is actually using, though, science teaches us now, what the mind could actually even get way back then was only 126 bits of information, not the 2 million that were coming at us every second. I just think that's so incredibly interesting because that says to me, like, I probably don't even really remember anything the way it happened, the way it actually happened. So what am I going to get stirred up into a rage and a fury about? I'm making it all up anyway. No, really, because what I remember is only a fraction. It's only a drop in the bucket. So another thing, and I think this is key to how we make progress, how I think this is a key component to how we have healing in our life. That A Course in Miracles also says the teacher of God, so that's all of us, we're all God's teachers on earth. The teacher of God must ask him herself every day, God, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to who? In other words, God, use me. Like St. Francis would say, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. You know, God, use me in these situations. See, because part of that second phase for St. John of the Cross is we look and say, you know, what is it? What's my purpose? And what gives my life meaning? And you know, people have often thought that had to do with the job. And the purpose for which your soul incarnated is not a job. The purpose for which your soul came here is not something that you do in the outer world that you say, this is what gives my life meaning. The purpose and meaning of your life in the highest spiritual sense is, God, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to who? It's about you and I being willing to surrender that aspect of our human personality and says, this is why I'm here, for this high and mighty noble purpose, to I have to trust that God is bringing the right and perfect people into my life, and I will have the right and perfect words to say to them. You know, that I will in some way lift people up rather than take people down. That I will add light into situations rather than contribute to the darkness, that I will be a blessing energy on the world rather than a negative, depleting kind of energy on the world. I think it's really, really interesting, you know, that to be able to get to this place where we absolutely trust that that presence of the living spirit within us knows what we need to know. But you don't get it all ahead of time. You get it in the moment. So when the disciples were about to go out and begin their ministries, they went out 2 by 2, which I think is interesting, so that somebody was always holding the light for whoever couldn't hold the light in the moment. I think that's the wisdom of 2 by 2. In the Bible it says that wherever 2 or more are gathered in my name, right? And so because you know how it is. Left to my own devices, it's Twinkies and bad TV, I confess, That's just the way it is, I mean, this is why the low road is the low road. It's really easy to get there, So I have people in my life who remind me, oh yes, the high road, the high road, the high road. That's what I'm here for, really, is this path of the high road. So the disciples say to Jesus, what are we going to say to people? Right? What are we going to say to people? And Jesus' response is great. He says, I'm going to tell you when you get there. It's not something you're going to memorize. It's not something you can study for. I'm going to tell you when you get there. So that everything you need, this is an example of everything you need is going to be provided in the moment. Which I think is extraordinary because, I'm one of those people who I have like a 40-year plan, and, with monthly increments all the way. And what I've learned with those things is that they usually fall to pieces very, very quickly. That, I plan, God laughs. I plan some more, God laughs harder. I really, really seriously plan, and God is hysterical. And I think it's important to plan. I think it's important that we have a goal, that we have a direction that we're moving in. I think that's really true for all of us. We should have a goal in our relationship, and we should have a goal around our work, and we should have a goal around our health, and we should have a goal around our we should have a goal around every important area of our life, and hold the goal lightly. Have the goal, but also simultaneously hold the goal lightly, knowing that there is an ebb and flow in the universe, that the energy comes in and energy goes out, and things expand and things contract. And it's just the natural process. I say to people all the time, I say, if you only like it when situations are exactly the way you like it to be, have you noticed that most of the time you will be unhappy? Because either things are on the way to becoming that, or they're on the way of descending from that. They've been that and they're becoming something else. So it's like if you lived at the beach, I love the beach. But one thing you know about the beach is the tide is either in the process of coming in or it's in the process of going out. There's actually a split second where the tide is fully in, right? When we look at the charts, the tide's coming in. Tide's in, oh, no, tide's going out. So if you live at the beach for when the tide is only in, you're going to be satisfied for about a split second every day. Yeah. That's because there's an ebb and flow in the universe all the time. When I teach in the seminary, I often talk about the work of Dr. Harold Kushner, Rabbi Kushner. He wrote a book, I think his first book that became really famous was When Bad Things Happen to Good People. I love this book, and so I always make my ministerial students read it and write on it. And so he and his wife were visited by horrific tragedy involving their young son. And they were, of course, devastated by this. And so they did what everybody does. They asked why. Why? And of course, what they hit on is that there's no satisfactory answer for why, especially in those devastating things. There's no satisfactory answer. And so what Rabbi Kushner came up with was the question is this: what will we do now? So this has happened, what will we do now? Because there's no going back, right? There's no going back. Once they had experienced that tragedy, they couldn't untragedy, right? So what will we do now? And the way I look at this for us as metaphysical spiritual students is, okay, this has happened in our life, whatever that is. You get to fill in the blank. What will I do with my heart now? What will I fill my mind with? How will I be in the world now that this has happened? All right, so it's happened. It wasn't my first choice on the menu. It would not be my greatest preference. Understood. Absolutely, I get it. But this has happened, so what will I do now? How will I be in the world? What will the content of my heart be? Everything that happens in our life, it either makes us harder as people or softer as people. We either become a greater vessel for the light and the love of God to flow into the world, or we become this sort of black hole where none of that can take place. And I think this is part of the extraordinary thing, is that we get to decide. We always, always, always get to decide how we're going to use what happens. You know, people have their 126 bits, right? From way back when. And now here it is, perhaps decades later, and they're defining their life by those 126 bits. You know, when there have been trillions and trillions of bits that they have just let wash by. And so for us as metaphysical spiritual students, you know, because we have free will, you know, God gave Adam free will in the garden. Because we have free will, because we have choice, it's like the universe stands and says, so, this has happened. What are you going to do with it? Let's pray. So we turn our attention inward now for a moment to just remember that where we are, God is. The infinite love and wisdom that created the entire universe out of itself is right here, expressing in and through and around each and every one of us. And so as we join together in thought and prayer today, I speak the word for us that we continue to release the need to know why, to release that very human personality piece that takes up so much time and attention. And we sort of step over the line into, okay, so this has happened. What am I going to do now? How am I going to be? Will I allow this that has happened to define me? Or will I choose God? Will I choose love? Will I choose light? Will I choose peace and happiness? I speak the word for us today that our soul, the soul of each and every person here, has purpose and has meaning. And I'm certain that that purpose and meaning for each and every one of us has to do with the content of our heart and the quality of our experience and relationship with each other. That it's about the love that we give and receive. So we include in our prayer today our family members and friends and loved ones. We know that right where they are, wherever they are, God is fully present. We know that good surrounds them, uplifts them, that the very love and light of God infuse them, and their path is filled with light, not dark. We let our prayer be a blessing in the world so that all those situations that look so difficult to us humanly, we say, even in the midst of that, God is there. And so we bless and we forgive and we send love. And again and again and again, we remember God is right there, even in the midst of that. We bless our church. We bless all churches everywhere. We bless synagogues and temples, mosques, ashrams, all paths to God. And I'm certain that we are blessed, that we are all uplifted, that we're all healed by being together in consciousness this day. And so with a grateful heart, I just release this word. I know it's so. And together we say, Amen.